The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Welcome to For the Love of Words. My name is Priscilla, Almquist-Olsen, co-host, and tonight we're going to do something very unusual but spectacular, and that is my co-host, John Holgerson, a poet himself, is our guest on the program For the Love of Words. And let me tell you, so John, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to your own show.
Thank you. It's strange being on this side of the interview.
Yes. Anyway, I would like to share some of the information about our esteemed guest, John Holgerson. He has written 3 books of poetry and had them published. One is called Convictions of the Heart, and it was published by In Case of Emergency Press, 2021. That's very interesting. Unnecessary Tattoo and Other Stains on a Stainless Steel Heart. Now that volume of poetry must have been really interesting. And that was produced in 2016. And finally, Broken Borders by Wasteland Press in 2012. He has published, of course, in many literary journals and other publications. He's been a featured poet at several southeastern Massachusetts venues and also other venues beyond Massachusetts, including Plymouth's Poetry, The Art of Words. And of course, that's located in Plymouth, Mass. The New England Poetry Club readings in the Fruitlands Museum in Harvard, Mass. And he read this past May at Poets House in New York City. So he's a traveling poet. He is one of 3 Mass Poetry representatives for Bristol County. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, he is a co-host at For the Love of Words on Easton Community Access Television. He lives most of the year in Taunton, Massachusetts, but since 1995, he resides part of each year on the Greek island of Hydra. Did I say that right?
In English, that's Hydra. In Greek, it's Idra.
Idra. Okay, so we're going to say it right, Idra, the island of Idra. And if you want to learn more about John and his poetry, you can visit him online at John Holgerson, and that's Holgerson, a common Swedish surname, .com, johnholgerson.com. For more information, please do that. John, such a pleasure.
It's very interesting. It's a pleasure, of course, to be interviewed, but it's very interesting to be on this side of the microphone.
Yes, well, you're going to do really well because your poetry is very, from what I've heard, I haven't heard it yet, but I've heard that you really dwell deeply into your material. And you're also very concise and to the point. And that reflects your having been an attorney.
Yes, I was.
A defense attorney.
I'm still a member of the Massachusetts Bar. I'm not practicing. I stopped practicing in 2019, but I'm still a member of the bar.
So tell us a little bit how that influenced the poetic path.
Actually, there were 2, I consider it 2 different lives, to be honest with you. I started writing when I was 13, and it wasn't poetry. It was television scripts in a composition book, you know, those black and white speckled composition books, for a black and white show called The Fugitive, which maybe some older members of the audience would remember, and also the show The Man from U.N.C.L.E. When I was 17, I started to write poetry, not very well, but it wasn't until I got into college that I ran into a professor named John Matthias, who was brand new on the campus, brand new faculty member in 1966, and I took 2 or 3 courses from him, and he would have his students over to his home off campus where we would read our own poetry as well as other poetry, and we would discuss it. And it was at his rather urging that I continued to write poetry. And all these years later, I did that. I did it while I was a practicing attorney, but I did not do it from the point of view of trying to get published until 2012, when I had quite a bit of work to choose from. And I kept my writing life pretty different from my attorney life as a public defender. I was a trial and appellate attorney with the public defender's office for 31 years. And then I went into I left the public defender's office and went into a small firm in Taunton where I practiced for 14 years, again as a trial attorney. So once I left the practice of law in 2019, I focused more on writing, getting more work published, and that's pretty much the story. But I kept my life as an attorney separate from my life as a writer.
But don't you think there's always the influence and impact of that separate life on your poetry?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, one of the things that I was trained to do as a trial attorney was to be observant and always take note of details. And when you're a writer, whether it's fiction or poetry, detail matters more than anything, really. Being a trial attorney was not helpful from the point of view of being concise, however, which poetry requires you to be concise. At least for me, it does. So that was some discipline that I needed to put upon myself.
So, if you had to choose between practicing law and producing poetry, how would you come down on that?
Well, I think that when I was a young man and I was 18, I had made the decision that I wanted to become an attorney. I didn't know what kind of an attorney then, but I went to a college that had a 6-year law program, and I went through that program, got my law degree in 6 years instead of the normal 7. During that time is when I met Professor John Mathias on those poetry courses. And it was somewhat difficult not to change my mind and not to switch my destination. But I kept to my goal and kept the writing as a secondary feature.
And it probably has brought you much joy and satisfaction. In terms of those two qualities, did you experience any joy and satisfaction as a lawyer?
As a lawyer, yes, I did, because one of the things about our criminal justice system is the ordinary guy who goes into court, the local district court, knowing nothing about the system and how it works. If he does not have he or she does not have the proper guidance and defense, they can be pretty much chewed up by the machinery that goes on in the criminal justice system. Again, in the district courts, where they handle hundreds of cases, usually on a daily basis. So being a public defender, my job, as I saw it, was to make sure that everyone I was appointed to represent not only got a fair trial, but also got their due process through the system. And many public defenders in general have a sort of a bad rap as not being very good lawyers. But I can tell you that the organization that I worked for, the State Public Defender's Office, when I started, was called the Massachusetts Defenders Committee. And I can tell you that the lawyers that I worked with and that I trained with were outstanding criminal defense lawyers. And it takes experience, but once you get into that mode and know what you're doing, you can make a difference in people's lives, people whose lives would otherwise perhaps not end up with the same positive result if you weren't there.
And to let our viewing audience know, public defenders are lawyers who represent people who do not have the means to hire their own attorneys.
And who are charged with some criminal offense. The when I started in the public defender's office, we represented people charged with both small crimes called misdemeanors as well as serious crimes called felonies. And then as the years evolved, the Massachusetts Defenders Committee became the Committee for Public Counsel Services and divided itself between misdemeanors, lawyers who would handle just misdemeanors, and lawyers who would handle the more serious felony cases. So because of my experience when that divide happened, I ended up, of course, representing people in Superior Court on the more serious criminal cases.
Well, so poetry must have been also a wonderful outlet for perhaps some frustrations or, you know, in your profession.
Because well, I wrote very little about, wrote very few poems about the criminal justice system, a couple, but not many. Again, I tried very hard to divide my writing life from my life as a trial attorney, simply because I didn't want everything to be trial attorney stuff.
Exactly. Well, my question was really about the outlet that you had, because you might, not that you'd be writing about the criminal justice system, but that it would provide you some sort of release and a chance to express when at moments when you might be in distress or angry.
Well, I can't honestly say that to be the case. You know, I tried very hard. My poetry, as you'll hear tonight, especially in this last book, Convictions of the Heart, is really based on, again, being observant about the human condition and the human relationships that exist in our society and it's amongst all human beings, not just in our society, but in Greece, for example, or other countries. And I kind of focus on human relationships in my poetry. And again, not those human relationships that exist in the courtroom.
Okay. So tell me, what has brought you the most satisfaction? Do you have a poem that you really have enjoyed that's been a highlight of your journey?
I can't honestly say that I favor one of my poems over some of the others. The ones that have been published are probably the ones that I like the best for obvious reasons. But no, I can't honestly pull one out and say this is the one that means the most to me.
Okay, well, we're going to hear some. So thank you so much, John.
Again, thank you for this kind of unique situation. Appreciate it.
You're so welcome. And the audience will be appreciating some wonderful poetry by John Holgerson, co-anchor of For the Love of Words. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to be reading primarily from my most recent book, Convictions of the Heart, which was published in 2021, as Priscilla indicated. The book is really divided into two major halves. The first half are poems that I've written on or about Hydra, the island, the Greek island where I spend a lot of my time each year. The second half of the book is called Other People, Other Places, that have nothing to do with the Greek island of Hydra. But I want to start with the one poem that's in the prologue of the book, because the book is really about remembrance and the remembering of people and events that have occurred in my life. And this poem, this short poem called Things Remembered, kind of sums that up. Things Remembered for JLH. Time captured in a frayed tapestry lining the frail cedar chest of memory, boxed up by a year, a dying decade, the turn of another nascent millennium. For memories bind us all together, the then and now married forever, as strong and as fragile as the small and resolute red apple stem. The first few poems I'm going to read are poems about the island of Hydra written in different decades. The first one was my first venture to the island, which was when I was 22 years old in March of 1970. And this is the poem, which was written back then in 1970. That is the first poem in the section of the book dealing with the island of Hydra. Hydra, March 1970. Stonewall stitches spiral up mountainsides behind red roof rock houses on which stray tomcats confide. Chapels on hillsides closed by time and desertion, cloaked in green moss shawls, relics of the hoary pirate's religion. Calls of donkeys are its engines, revved up by shrill whistles from men with wooden whips. Stone streets are its only trestles. Above the tourist-trapped parasites, where old men with whisperooms sweep up donkey dung, drowned in the scent of lilac and poppy fumes, silent monks kneel down and gaze upon a gray-hazed Peloponnese, thumbing well-worn worry beads amid ancient arboreal sentries. We're going to skip forward 40 years. Hydra, October 2010. The fishing boats scuttle daily in and out of the Horseshoe Harbor, wooden and fiberglass crabs seeking a shoal of squid or sponge. Tourist shops are bringing in their postcard century stanchions and wobbly wood tables with multicolored t-shirts bearing the island's name. Old-timers stroke sweat from bearded chins as they play pinochle and backgammon for beer and sausages in the old bars behind the yacht-lined harborfront. The air has become burdened by the thick weight of an alien humidity. It clings to the linings of the lungs like the soda-soaked clothes on our bodies. And like the ancient rapacious pirates buried unceremoniously in unmarked graves, this bullying sun of global burning has stormed the island's pine forests and seaboard, drying the groves to tinder while pushing up the beach's sandy skirts so the Aegean can take by force areas once beyond its greedy tidal grasp. Some stores along the harborfront will soon shut their double doors until April, when the poppies and tourists will both bloom again and the winter winds from Egypt and Israel will have blown this bastard mugginess westward, along with some sudden yet expected Sahara sand. Now we're going to take a journey that's not quite 40 years, it's only going to be 9. This poem is entitled Hydra, April 2019, for Leonard Cohen, 1934 to 2016. I stood outside your old home today, as I've done in years past. Tangled ivy vines from the roof terrace stretched down the wall toward me, a thin, green, leafy rope, inviting me to grab its strands with both hands and pull myself up. If I was a younger man, perhaps, but my wall-scaling days ceased long ago. Instead, I looked for the wire and the bird. I saw the former, a tightrope, taut and thin, pole-tied between red-roofed white houses. There was no sparrow, but I'm still here, listening for what cannot be heard. I put my hand on the wall of your house, hoping the lingering remnant of a once-strummed guitar riff or the clickety-clack of your old olive-green Olivetti would course through my fingertips, run the maze of jagged lines on my smooth palm, up my willing arm to the area of the brain or whatever part of the soul sends messages to the muse assigned to a scribbler of verse. But it doesn't work that way, does it, Leonard? That singular muse here for you then isn't mine, although I'd like to think they may be sisters or more likely cousins, once or twice removed. At Duskos Taverna, I dined on fresh Xiphias under the huge old pine tree, where once upon a time, before fame and fortune fell upon you, you sat, sang, and played guitar for Mariana and all your idiot friends. I'll come by tomorrow. You never know. Someone or something may be at home. This next poem I wrote in 2015 on Hydra. I was there by myself. I've been to the island with my wife. I've been to the island with my brother, my daughter, my friends. But on this particular journey in 2015, I was there alone. And so I wrote this poem for my wife, Robin. Ubiquity for Robin. I thought I could write just one damn poem without thinking of you. See one yellow flower along the uneven road's edge and not think of your hair. See a bluebird fluttering in the budding lemon trees and not think of your eyes. Late morning light melts the last stubborn shadows, warms the placid Aegean, and diminishes the stars. You are asleep beneath the same constant constellations 5,000 miles from me. You are here. In the other section of the book, Other People, Other Places, I'd like to read two short poems. One is called Butterfly Heart. It was an ekphrastic poem that I wrote as part of a invitation to a poetry reading in which you selected craft that was done by brain injury survivors. And you would then write a poem based on the craft you selected. I had selected a butterfly that had been handcrafted from different types of materials. And as I was writing the poem, I was thinking of Eleanor Rigby, the Beatles song. So between the handcrafted butterfly and the Beatles' Eleanor Rigby, this poem came about. Butterfly Heart. Her heart is a battered butterfly, floating from one inconstant lover to another, looking for compassion and honesty while keeping its own under cover. Anonymous, she lets it flit time away in a garden of chat rooms she grows online, talking about sad and broken moments, some quite profane, some quite divine. And in her nights of solitude, quiet but for some soft sighing, her heart finds solitude in the simple fact no one can hear a butterfly crying. This second poem was also one that I read at that particular poetry reading invitation, but in the following year, in which I selected a photograph that someone had done of broken barbed wire, a broken barbed wire fence. So this is that poem. Broken Heart Repair. In order to protect her fickle heart from being stolen and broken again by another callous but seductive liar, she cauterized the caustic cracks with gin, gorilla glued the pieces, and stitched them very carefully with razor-sharp barbed wire. So what I'd like to read now are some new poems. But again, they're going to be poems that relate to the island of Idra. This one is called The Old Men of Idra. The old men of Idra sit on a cool marble curb along the cobblestone street near the statue of the revolutionary Andrei Miolis, discussing the island's problems and how they would solve them if in charge. Some wear overalls stained with whitewash and putty from the lighter work they do now. The clothes of others smell of mullet and sea bass, caught early in the day and then sold to impatient tavernas. They all watch and laugh at the braying donkeys tethered along the harbor front, waiting for the giddy riders sailing on the hourly ferries and hydrofoils from Porus, Spetsi, and Athens. The children will want 20-euro donkey rides around the town, while their parents and the tourists will need the donkeys to carry their luggage to their homes and hotels, some high up the mountainside, towering above the town and its horseshoe harbor. The old men remember their own long-dead donkeys hauling the first refrigerators and washing machines up the uneven stone staircases and twisting concrete streets to the storied captain's mansions, once dying from time's decay and man's crumbling neglect. These wizened, weather-beaten elders restored them with their hard, calloused, nimble fingers and bleeding palms that left scars running along and through their crooked, leathered lifelines. They recall how they put up the first telephone poles in the 1960s, connected the wires that small brown sparrows would sit on, and how one Canadian poet wrote a song about it. They live in small whitewashed houses with roofs of reddish-orange tile and large blue, red, or purple shutters far behind the town and its bustling port. They are venerated by their children and grandchildren, for whom they built and rebuilt the island decade after decade with strength, sweat, and suffering. They are the unofficial mayors of their neighborhoods, where they know everyone and govern with a father's frail firmness and a grandfather's abiding generosity. While I was on the island all these different years that I was there, I met a series of very interesting people. The man that takes care of the world clock in Oslo, Norway, was one of the people I met on the island. I also met some movie producers on the island who cast me as an extra in the TV series So Long Marianne, which will be debuting on Canadian television later next month, September 27th to be exact. So this particular poem is very short, and it's about someone I met on the island for only a 3-hour period of time. But that discussion that we had for 3 hours walking around the island obviously left an impression upon me. It's called Cross Currents for Izzy M.G. For a few hours, in time's ebb and flow, our currents crossed, so we would share a memory, found and then lost, when the swifter current pulled away politely at the delta of age. This next poem, we're going to get away from the island of Idre. This next poem is a new poem. I went to an all-male high school in Taunton, Monsignor James Coyle High School. I graduated in 1965. We had our 10th, 25th, and 50th reunions, but now we also still meet, irregularly for luncheons and so on. But the number of people who meet has become less and less over the last several years. So this is a poem called Class Reunion that has to it somewhat of a tinge of black humor. The members of my all-male high school class gather now, more often than ever before, to bury another mate taken by cancer, heart attack, or Parkinson's, or some other malady that attends the inescapable lousiness of growing old, as some forgotten poet once said. We pray for the repose of his soul, at least some do, in a churchyard where none of us want to be. Then off to a nearby pub where we sit silently, eat pizza, drink an enormous amount of beer, and look knowingly around the table, wondering who appears the most debilitated? Who should we vote most likely to be next in this new yearbook? Looking at each other through a lens darkly, we are all easily the candidate most likely to succeed. While nobody wants that title, not one of us relish the status of the last man standing, of being alone. The bill is paid from earlier donations to a funereal fund started after we began to die on a regular basis. It had not been a pleasant task, but a necessary one when the in-between times became so much shorter. We depart the pub's lot in the same lineup that drove to the cemetery, knowing next time there will be one less dancer in this metallic, rubber-wheeled conga line. I fear only the unperceived, precipitous preliminaries. Okay, I have two more poems that I'm going to read. This next one, we've all had these moments when we've been in a place that suddenly there's a noise, a scent, or something we see visually that sends us back in time, that makes us remember an event that we have pretty much put out of our memory, or at least it's so far back in the mind's attic that it takes something like this event to pull it forward. Marcel Proust, in his writings, wrote quite a bit about such a moment. It even has the name, the Proustian moment. So there's an epigraph to this title of this poem by Marcel Proust. The poem's called Brief Return to a Paradise Lost. The only true paradise is always the paradise that we have lost. Marcel Proust. For a few years after our parents died, there were instances when I entered the back door foyer of the house where my brother and I grew up. And even though no one lived there then, except the ghosts of birthdays and Christmases past, I could smell the fried chicken our mother cooked for dinner after church on most Sundays. I'd stand there, close my eyes, an adult playing statues, and that sweet aroma would be so amplified I could hear our animated discussions and laughter at the dining room table, where we all sat and remember what growing up there was like and how safe and how loved I felt. On those occasions, I did not want to turn the key so the door into the kitchen would open, for the chimeras of smell and sound would vanish, replaced by the silence, loss, sadness, and regret that then sat in those 4 chairs, placed neatly around that once so well used table. This last poem is a very recent poem that I wrote just a month or so ago. It's about writing poetry, and it's about one calling oneself a poet, because not everyone who writes something that rhymes or something that looks like zigzag lines on a sheet of paper is actually a poet. I know they like to call themselves that, and it's just that the title poet carries a responsibility and a weight. At least it does as far as I am concerned. So this poem is about that responsibility of being a poet. It's a poem that I wrote after reading another poem, which is the epigraph mentioned in the epigraph to this one. This poem is called If There Were No Poems, after If There Were No Paintings by Leonard Cohen. If there were no poems in the world, maybe then would mine be important. Since this isn't the case, let us not hurry to write just any line. Let us first prove ourselves worthy of the title poet. We have the time to find beauty in every scene and record it so it never erodes or fades away. Look around you. Choose to see what you chose not to see before. It could be a dog walking with its owner on a familiar crow-lined road for the very last time, or a man watching the demolition of a building where he once both lived and worked, or a posthumous portrait of the self-imposed quirks of a red-headed mother. It may be a usual muse, like the pretty woman walking down the street who smiles without warning or expectation at the old man with kind eyes peeking out at her beneath the brim of his well-worn brown cap. The editor of a literary journal might call such works poems. I call them admissible evidence required to reach a final verdict. Thank you very much.
Welcome to For the Love of Words. I'm Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, your host, and today we're doing a Zoom interview with a New Englander who's not too far away, but she's up in Maine, in York, Maine, and her name is Lexi James, and she is Lexi James and the Wild Heart Band. Lexi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, it's wonderful that you're here, and we're going to benefit hearing some of your original songs. And tell us a little bit about your background. How did you fall in love with music? Any influences from your childhood?
Well, I always loved music. I was that kid who used to put on shows for my family, and I'd force everybody to sit down and watch me like I was performing a real concert. But I didn't really start pursuing music until I was in high school. And my stepdad, he heard me sing, and he'd been in bands his entire life. And he said, I think you're really good. If you want help, if you want to do this, then I'll help you. And so he was the first one to really say, I really believe in you. My mom always thought that I was great, but she was kind of like, am I being a biased mother? Do I just think that she's good because she's my daughter? Um, so yeah, so in high school I started, and part of the reason that I fell in love with music was because when I was 10, I developed a stutter, and was pretty prominent through middle school and high school, and it's still stutter here and there today, but most people don't notice. But yeah, music has really been a passion of mine for as long as I can remember.
And so, how did you get started writing your own lyrics?
You know what? I started singing first. I was singing for a lot longer, and then I think a couple years after I started performing out in high school, I just started journaling, and I just started writing lyric ideas or just writing whatever popped into my mind. And then around that same time, I said that I wanted to learn how to play the guitar. And my stepdad and my mom bought me a guitar, and I taught myself. He helped me a little bit, but I taught myself mainly how to play just kind of basic chords. And from there, I just would start strumming things and singing melodies to it. And, I just kind of fell into that pretty naturally. I don't really remember a moment of being like, oh, now I want to start writing songs. It just kind of felt like it was a natural next step.
Yeah. And so, where did you get some of the ideas for your songs?
So I've written songs about, being in love or breakups. Breakups are my favorite songs to write. I like the kind of like angry or kind of sad songs. They tend to be easier to write, weirdly enough. But yeah, I've written about like my love life. I've written songs about my family. I've written songs about my experiences with bullying. I try to write about different aspects of my life because while, love and relationships and breakups are great material and they make great songs, and there's something that songs will always be written about. I think it's cool to branch out a little bit and write some things, about other parts of your life that other people can relate to as well.
So, and when did you start writing songs? Do you remember how old you were?
I think I wrote my first song, and I was jotting down stuff in a journal probably from the time I was 14. But I think I wrote my first song when I was about 18. I think 17 or 18 was when I wrote my first like finished song. Because the first song I think I ever wrote was probably like 6 or 7 minutes long, and it was insane. Which is what I hear from a lot of people. When you start writing songs, you just write whatever, and you're not thinking about timing or structure or normal things about a song. You just kind of start writing, and it ends up being like 7 minutes long. So,
do you have the melody first, or do you have the words first?
It definitely varies. Sometimes it's a melody. Sometimes I'll just be driving around and I'll be thinking about something I'm going through, and lyric ideas just kind of pop up into my head. A lot of the time I get ideas like right as I'm falling asleep. But it definitely varies. And sometimes I'll just sit down, I'll think, let me just try writing something. And I'll just sit down with my guitar and start strumming and try to figure out from there. But yeah, it's different. It's different every time, which is why I love songwriting, because it's never the same process.
Yeah, and so you must get a lot of joy and as well as satisfaction from the task, but you must have some frustrating moments too, trying to get through. And tell us about those.
About like writing songs specifically?
Yes, about some of the frustrations and some of the ups and downs.
Yeah, so I mean, music as a whole is the whole industry trying to chase music as in itself is an adventure. It's definitely a roller coaster. But it's fun and it's interesting and it's different, and I like that it's never the same. There are days when I know what I want to write a song about, but I have writer's block for some reason and I can't get it out. There are days that, my voice doesn't sound the way that I think it should. And I get frustrated about that. And then the industry too makes it really difficult. It's really hard for independent artists to just make it today, because we've gotten to a point in the industry where these labels kind of want these artists to do all this work up front and build their own following and become pretty successful on their own before they even get looked at by labels. And it's really difficult. I've been told that I'm just not good enough. I've been told I won't make it because I'm from New England. I've been told I was too fat. I've been told I should dye my hair. So it's just the music industry. Unfortunately, it's terrible that that's how it is, but that's how it is.
Do you have people who you respect and you trust to view your songs and give you some opinions on and evaluate your songs in any way? Maybe you have a mentor that you rely on.
So I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by a lot of really great people in my family, in my personal life, in my band, and it's kind of funny because a lot of people will think that, you know, the mom of a singer will just tell that singer that they're great all the time and everything that they do is great. And my mom will be the first one to tell me, you know, you need to work on this. You need to do this. I don't love this song. I like this song. She's the first one to be very honest with me because, you know, if she's not honest with me, then I can't get any better. And my stepdad for sure is, I mean, he's still the bass player in my band. And so he's always right there with me. He's somebody that I really trust to go to and ask opinions. And all the guys in my band, I mean, my drummer, his name is Mark Robillard. He's also my producer. He has a studio in his house, and that's where we started recording over the past year. And he's always really honest with me. He's always upfront about what he likes, what he doesn't like. And that's kind of what you have to do. You have to be able to take that constructive criticism because sometimes you're too close to something and you like it because you're attached to it. There's an emotional attachment there, but you have to be able to find those people in your life who are willing to be honest with you to help you get better and make it to the next level. And I'm really lucky because I'm surrounded by that in my life.
That's so wonderful. And you're open-minded. You see, that's important.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be open-minded and willing
Yeah.
to accept what people's evaluations of your works.
Yeah.
Now tell us about Wild Heart Band. Now your stepfather is the bass?
Yes. So my
How did
stepdad.
How did it get started, the band?
So when my stepdad first came to me and he said, you know, I think you're really talented. I think you can really sing. And if you want to try to, you know, if you want to play out or if you want to pursue this as a career, I'd love to help you because he's been doing it his entire life. And I said, sure. And so the first thing that, you know, he had me do, he was in a band at the time and they were kind of auditioning to find a new vocalist for their band. And he said, why don't we do this? Why don't you come down? Why don't you learn the songs and come down and help us practice for when these other people come down to audition? And that way you can, that'll be your first taste of like playing with the band, singing with the band. We can, you know, that'll be like a nice, easy first step. And so I went down and I rehearsed with them and all of these other girls came down and auditioned. And after a few people came down, they all said that, you know, Lexi, you're better than everybody who's come down and auditioned. So we just want you to be in the band. So
they adopted you.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
and
so let's go on to some of the videos we're going to hear because we have about 4 minutes left of this interview.
Yeah.
So tell me, we have 3 songs, and tell me a little bit about each of them.
So let me see. We have Boomerang, which is probably one of my favorite songs I've ever written. I wrote it with this really amazing songwriter in Nashville. Her name's Melissa Sheridan, and it's you know, at the time I wrote this, I was going through a situation with a guy I was dating who was very off and on and very, you know, he came around when he wanted to, and then he left when he got bored. And I was really, you know, hurt trying to get through it. So we wrote this song called Boomerang. And then another one of my songs that you have is Leaving Me Slowly, which is my latest release. And I wrote that one with this songwriter. His name is Steve Vito. He's a fellow New Englander. He was in Massachusetts. I'm not sure where he is now, but you know, he had a track that he had created, and he said, you know, do you like it? We can try to write to this. And I loved it. So we just kind of started spitballing back and forth and came up with this idea of, going through a really long drawn out breakup, and you just wish it would, you could break those ties already and start to move on. And the last song is called Your Mama and
What's the second song? What's that second song called?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's called Leaving Me Slowly.
Oh my goodness.
And
that's just like, what is it? It's a take on the singer, the pianist and songwriter. I'm having a senior moment. What's her name? Something Singing Me Slowly, isn't it? Or something like that?
Oh, Killing Me Softly. Yeah.
Singing Me Softly.
Oh, I didn't. You know what? I didn't even think about that. That's so funny.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good point.
Yes, it is. Okay. And the third one is about what?
So the third one is called Your Mama and Me. And that song is really special to me for a lot of reasons. It was inspired by my nephew. And he just turned 6 this past weekend, actually. And he has autism. And he's just the most amazing. Him and my nieces are just like the most amazing part of my life. But he was the firstborn. So I remember just looking at him one day and I just couldn't believe how much I loved him. And I remember just thinking, if I love my nephew this much, how much am I going to love my own kids someday? And so I started thinking about that and came up with this idea for a song from the perspective of a father who's getting ready to give his daughter away on her wedding day. And he's looking back on their life and all these moments, all these small moments. And, him just saying to her that, he just wants her to be happy, but just remember that, the first people who loved you and supported you were your mama and me. And it's one of my favorite songs too, because it's the first song I released that I ever wrote entirely by myself. So I'm really proud of that one.
That's wonderful. And
yeah.
So how would you characterize your music? Would you say country pop?
Yeah, I'd say country pop for sure.
Okay, because that's how I would evaluate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what are your future plans? We have about 30 seconds left.
So I'm in the studio again. I have new music coming very soon. I have a busy summer touring all around New England. So, people can go to my website, which is lexijamesmusic.com, and you can get to all of my socials from there. Follow me, find out where I'm going to be, and get all of the latest news about what's going on.
Lexi is spelled Lexi, so it's
yes.
lexijamesmusic.com.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Lexi, so much, and all the best in the future. And
thank you so much.
And continued success. I know you're going to make it big. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I had a great time.
Love your music.
I don't miss you, but I miss you so bad. I don't want to, but I want you back. If I drive to your place tonight, we both know where it's gonna go. Wanna tell you that it's over, but I know that I'm not strong when I see your eyes. I'm falling right back in your arms, getting closer and closer. You fix things just as easily as you break them. You pull me in just to push me away. And I shouldn't stay, but my rain, I'm right back where I know that I shouldn't be. Can't hold back. Every time you say my name, I stay. And I shouldn't stay, but I stay for my rain. I just hate to, but I love you so bad. I could blame you, but I blame me for coming back. could drive for 1,000,000 miles and it still wouldn't make me forget. Is it over? I need closure. I can't fight something deep inside that's taking me back to your house tonight. You fix things just as easily as you break them. You pull me in just to push me away. And I shouldn't stay, but my rain, and I'm right back where I know that I shouldn't be. Get home back. Every time you say my name, I stay, and I shouldn't stay, but I stay for my rain. Last night was the first time I didn't cry, when I realized you'd always be that guy who can fix things just as easily as you break them. You'll pull me in just to push me away. I shouldn't stay, but my ring, and I'm right back where I know that I shouldn't be. Get home back. Every time you say my name, I stay, and I shouldn't stay, but I stay for my ring. Why do I stay? I shouldn't stay. They always stay for my ring. I'm over these games you play. I don't know what you want or if you're ever gonna stay. Now you can't look at me. The silence says everything. I wish that you would say what you really wanna say, what you came to say. So rip it off fast, rip it off fast. Take it all back, take it all back. Just break my heart now if you ever cared about me. Let it all go, let it all go. You already know, I already know it. I really don't wanna be lonely, but it's better than you leaving me slowly. Yeah, you blew me off again. Say you would call me up, but you're out hanging with your friends. And I shouldn't be surprised. It's happened more than a couple times. But I bought into us while you were only paying rent. And now that time is spent. So rip it off fast, rip it off fast. Take it all back, take it all back. Just break my heart now if you ever cared about me. Let it all go, let it all go. You already know, I already know it. I really don't wanna be lonely, but it's better than you leaving me slowly. This is like a slow dance, heartbreak, never time for healing. You're just like a ghost haunting every step I take away from you. So if you're gonna do it, just get it over with and rip it off fast, rip it off fast. Take it all back, take it all back. Just break my heart now if you ever cared about me. Let it all go, let it all go. You already know, I already know it. Even though I hate being lonely, it's better than you leaving me slowly. better that you're leaving me slowly. I've been thinking a lot since you told me. And he got down on one knee, gave you a ring, and asked you to be his everything. Flashbacks like pictures in my mind. All these years gone by, guess you haven't been my little girl for a long time. And just like that, I'm back to that very first day when your mama handed you to me, and I couldn't help but think, I don't know who you are or who you're gonna be if you don't play guitar or go to school to teach. No matter what's in your heart, no matter the life you lead, always remember your first fans were your mama and me. I remember driving you to ballet, all your soccer games, and how I tried so hard not to cry on graduation day. I always told myself not to blink, 'cause I'd miss something. And when I tucked you in at night, I'd always think, I love who you are and who you're gonna be. Maybe you'll play guitar or go to school to teach. No matter what's in your heart, no matter the life you lead, always remember your first fans were your mama and me. I just want you to be truly happy, and I don't care where that is or who it's with. And for the first time in my whole life, I don't mind stepping aside and putting your hand in his, 'cause you know who you are, who you're gonna be. You've come so far, you can do anything. You know what's in your heart and where you want your life to lead. But please remember who your first fans were. Please tell me you'll always remember your first fans were.